Okay, so now that we know our way around the interface of Godot, let's actually build something. So the very first thing that we need to do is tell Godot what we want the root node of our application to be. In order to do that, what we need to do is click on Custom Node. Now, because we're creating a two-dimensional game or simulation, we are going to select a node from this list right here. And let me just expand some of these. All of these nodes are the visible and non-visible components, or quote unquote nodes. They're the building blocks of your game and simulation. And so we are slowly going to learn about these, and these pre-built nodes are what make Godot so powerful. But for right now, we just need to declare our root node. So again, let me close this, and I'm just going to click Custom Node, or I can also click this plus up here. I'm going to click Custom Node, and I'm actually going to select Node 2D, and I'm going to click Create. And when I do that, you can see over here that it has added to this scene the Node 2D node. This is just helping us get started. We can't see anything, but what we can do is we can rename this node. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select rename, and just for fun, because it's going to be our main scene, I'm going to rename it main, capital M-A-I-N. I could have named it anything, but I want that to be my main node. Now let's actually do something visible so that we can see it. So I'm going to select my main node, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a child node. And this time I am going to come to my controls. This is my big long list of nodes here. And actually what I want is a label node. And I can see down here, the Godot engine actually gives me a description of what a label is. And it says it displays plain text in a line or wrapped inside a rectangle. And then it gives me a little additional information. If I want to use formatted text, that I should not use the label, but I should use the rich text label node. But for right now, let's keep it simple and just choose label. So I have it selected, and I'm going to click Create. And we can see on the viewport now, I have this box with these handles, and I can click and drag this around. I can also resize it by clicking on these handles. But let's just put it somewhere here in the middle. And then over on the inspector panel, what the inspector panel is showing me right now are all of the properties associated with the label node. And one of those properties is the text property. So what I want to do is type in some text into this field. So I'm just going to say, hello, LTEC 654, just like that, and put an exclamation point. Boom. Now I'll click out of that, and you can see I actually have some text on my screen now, which is kind of nice. Now, interestingly, I noticed that right away my text is not centered. So I can adjust another property of my label, which is the alignment here. By default, it's set to left, but I'm going to change that to center. And then also my vertical alignment is set to the top, and I want to change that to the center. Boom and boom. Now I have a nice vertically and horizontally aligned text box. And I'm going to resize the rectangle surrounding this just a little bit. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could center this on the page somehow? So in order to do that, one of the things that we're probably going to want are some guides to help us position things. So let's come over to the ruler over here and click and drag out a vertical ruler. And notice I'm holding down the mouse key right now and just dragging and dropping, or dragging it to the left and right. And now recall our viewport is 1024 pixels. So the halfway point would be 512. So I am going to drop this guide right at 512. Now let's do the same thing by adding a horizontal guide. Now keep in mind our viewport is 600 pixels from here to here. And I'm going to drop this down, and I want it to be right at the halfway point, which would be 300 pixels. Now I can move around this box, and I can line it right up on that horizontal guide. Let me show you a little bit more about the properties of this node, this label. Now I can come to rectangle, and it's giving me quite a bit of information about the bounding box or the rectangle that is highlighted and shown here. I can see that its X and Y position is at 415, the Y position. If I brought it all the way up to the top, that Y position would be 0 because it's all the way up at this top line. I can also see the size of this box. It's 142 pixels wide by 44 pixels in height. And of course, if I was to drag any of these handles, I would see the size change quite quickly. So just a little bit of information about the size of this label and its position on or within the viewport. Keep in mind that this intersection right here is 0.00, X and Y. Now let's actually save our program. So I'm going to come Scene and Save Scene. Now I can tell that I haven't saved, I've made changes and haven't saved anything because of this asterisk right here. And there's another asterisk up here. And that's just a visual hint that, hey Dan, you've been changing things, but you haven't saved it. You better save what you're doing. So I'm going to come up here and I want to save this scene. And Godot is going to ask me, well, what do you want to save this scene? What do you want to call it? By default, it's taken the name main because that's what I named my root node. And it has a .tscn extension that stands for text scene. And I'm just going to leave that default and I'm going to click save. And now if I look in my file system doc, I can see there's a new object in here, which is actually a scene called main.tscn. Now what I want to do is actually run my game. And so I'm going to come over here to this triangle and this is the play button. So I'm going to go ahead and click play. And the first time I do this, it's going to give me a warning. It says, wait a minute, no main scene has ever been defined. Select one. In order to run our game, yes, indeed, we have to select a main scene. So I'm going to select it. And then notice it's showing me in my resources folder for my project, it's listing all of the scenes that are available. Well, we had just created one, our main scene. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to click open. And when I do that, Godot says, okay, I know which scene is the default main scene, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. And so here you go, I'm actually seeing my quote-unquote game, which is nothing more than a window with a little bit of text in it. And if I want to stop playing this, I can just simply close it, and that's going to stop Godot from playing the game. So now what we want to do is let's change the background color of our quote-unquote game. So to do that, I'm going to come over to main again, and I am going to right-click to add a child node. I want to add a child to this main 2D node. So I'm going to say add child, and actually I'm going to get another control. What it's going to be is a color rectangle, color rect. And what is a color rect? Well, it is simply just a colored rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And you can see, boom, in our workspace, we can see immediately Godot has put a rectangle here. And it happens to be white. That's the default color. I can resize it and I can move it around however I want. So what I want to do is I'm not going to use the mouse to manipulate this. I'm going to come over to the inspector panel and I'm going to adjust the size, position, and color of this colored rectangle. So to do that, I want to expand the rectangle properties box. So notice how that drops down. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to set the X and Y value to be 0 and 0. So I'm going to type in 0 for both of those. That puts the very top of my rectangle right at 0.00 of the viewport. Now I want this rectangle to take up the whole screen. In other words, the whole viewport. So that means I need to change its size. I'm going to change its width to be the same width as the viewport, which is 1024 pixels. I'm going to type that in and hit enter. And I'm going to change the height of that colored rectangle to be 600. So I'm going to do that and hit enter. Let's change the color property of this color rectangle. I don't want it to be white. So I'm going to click up here in the color space, and notice we get this really quite powerful color selection tool. And I can pick any kind of color and select whatever I want. I could also put in a hexadecimal code. If you are used to other ways of thinking about red, green, blue in the alpha channel, you can adjust those colors. So you can get any color you need to match by using this color picker. Now I'm going to go with something in the blue space, I want to go a little bit grayer than that, maybe something like that. So I'm just kind of randomly clicking around. When I'm done, I'm going to click out of this, and notice I have my bluish color rectangle. So I'm going to save. I can just do Control S, or I could come up and click Scene, Save Scene, and I'm going to run my game again. And boom, I see my blue rectangle. Now, of course, one of the things you probably noticed is, wait a minute, where did our label go? We can't see our text anymore. Now, this is a very important concept, so let's talk about it. This is a tree structure over here in the scene dock. And the order of these nodes, right now, the main scene has two nodes. It has a label and it has a color rectangle. The order matters. The color rectangle is actually in front of the label. And I know that because it's lower in this tree. In other words, the more things we add, we're stacking them on top of each other. But that's easy to fix. I can select the color rectangle and just drag it up and drop it. And now I've put it behind the label. And notice if I look at the viewport, I can see my label again. The label comes in front. The important concept here is that this order matters, and the things that are lower in the scene tree are actually more in front. That's a very important concept in programming with visual objects such as games and simulations. Okay, so let's save our scene and come over and play it again, and boom, we see our blue rectangle in our viewport, and we see our white text, hello, LTEC 654. Let's take this full screen and see what happens. Now I go full screen, I'm going to click the button. It's going to take a minute to think about it. And it goes up full screen, but wait a minute, my monitor resolution is actually bigger than the size of the viewport. And that size, it's not filling up the screen. So that's not something that we want. We actually want this to scale to the resolution of the monitor. And that's something that Godot makes very easy to fix or to adjust. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to hit escape or exit out of full screen mode. I'm going to close what I'm running. And what I'm going to do is make a change to the project settings. So I'm going to come over to my project main menu, click project settings, and then there's all kinds of things to choose from here, but I'm actually on the general tab. I'm going to come all the way back down to window, and then I'm going to scroll down to the window, and here it says stretch, and the stretch mode right now is disabled. That's the default setting. In other words, the viewport didn't stretch to accommodate the resolution of the game player's or the user's monitor. So we want to enable that. And there's a couple of different ways we can enable it. But for us, we want to use 2D because we're creating a two-dimensional experience. So 2D, after selecting that, I'm going to click close. Now, notice the asterisk. We've made a change, but we haven't saved that. So we better save our project. Click Save As. Now, let's go ahead and run our game. And it loaded up. Now I'm going to go ahead and click full screen, and it's going to think about it for a minute, and then it's going to launch it. And look, now my application that I'm building, my two-dimensional game, is going to scale to match the resolution of our 2D viewport. And still, I can see my text in the center, and I can see my blue rectangle background is filling up the entire screen. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to hit escape and drop out of this, or I can come up here and exit out there, and then I want to stop the game engine from running.